Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear subscribers and listeners and guests to this channel, I would like to address a very interesting question, and that is the strange silence of President Putin. Sometimes silence speaks more than words, and this, I think, is exactly the case now. The problem is that over the last 10 days since the capture or kidnapping or abduction of President Maduro of Venezuela, President Putin has been silent. Moreover, he hasn't appeared anywhere in any public fora, and the only time he or somebody who looked like him was seen in public was the Christmas service, the Russian Orthodox service on the 6th of January. Now, of course, like some people say, he may have had a vacation, he may be sick, he doesn't have to speak every day. Yeah, all that is true, except that the events that have taken place are extraordinary. Maduro or Venezuela is one of the key partners of Russia. Russian companies own a lot of stock in Venezuelan oil. Putin signed a treaty of military cooperation with President Maduro. Russian military advisors were in Maduro. Russian arms are in Venezuela. In other words, to simply just not say anything at all is strange. And this is why it is called the strange silence of President Putin. Now, of course, there was a reaction, and Russian representative at the United Nations, Mr. Nebezia, he did condemn it and did call it a piracy. I'm sorry, and did call it a capture and kidnapping and a violation of international law. So what? I mean, there's no action, just words at the UN and nothing at all from President Putin. Now, then, of course, there was more. There was capture of Russian tankers on the high seas. That is actually required immediate reaction. Russian property was seized, which was really a very, I would say, arrogant assertion of American power in Western Hemisphere, which is a world issue, which concerns Russia directly. It is their tankers, it is the Venezuelan oil that they are buying. This is something that involves agreements, different treaties, navigation rights, freedom of the seas, etc. Nothing, no reaction. So this is why I began to think it needs an explanation. There must be something that explains it. And I have counted 4 or 5 different theories, if you could call them theories, or different ways of explaining Putin's behavior. And I will give you those now, but then offer my own vision or understanding of what is going on. Now, the first theory or explanation, I can call it the two kings theory. And partially, not exactly, but partially, this was offered by Fiona Hill, who was one of the key witnesses in the impeachment trial of Putin, of Trump in his first term, and he's was an advisor to on Russian affairs. So she's a highly respected British scholar. By the way, at one point, many years ago, she was my student at Harvard. In any case, Fiona Hill said that Putin and Trump divided up the world, that there is some kind of a secret understanding between them. And according to this understanding, Putin respects Trump's rights in Western Hemisphere, and for him, Ukraine is a priority, and therefore there was some kind of understanding: you take whatever you want in Western Hemisphere, and I will have a free hand in Ukraine. That is the theory. Now, I don't share that theory at all, because I think if there was some kind of a secret understanding to that effect, there was absolutely no need for Putin to sign an agreement on military cooperation with Venezuela. They didn't have to. They could just simply agree to that Russia would help in whatever it could, but they didn't have to have a treaty. And having a treaty is a public statement to the world that my country is obligated by the treaty to do this, this, and that in defense of Venezuela. Also, I don't believe in that theory is because Russia would only give up its so-called assets in Western Hemisphere if there is no choice, if there is no other way. Whereas right now there is another way. Russia is winning in Ukraine, and there's very little, if anything, that Trump can do short of nuclear confrontation to stop it. In other words, the balance of power is such that I do not think that Putin voluntarily would give up Russia's assets in Western Hemisphere, such as several countries, including Cuba, just for the sake of pleasing Trump. So I do not accept this theory. Now, theory number two, that is widely used in Western media, is Putin is scared. That's the theory. This version is that President Putin acquiesced to Trump's strength, that he is afraid of an assassination, that he is next, as President Zelensky urged Trump to do, and that being scared, he's sitting out in some bunker and is not daring to come out, simply accepting what is coming at him by the omnipotent President Trump, who is taking over the world and showing real strength of the United States. Now, obviously, I do not accept that theory at all, simply because of Putin's behavior. If we watch the way he acted and the way he conducted himself over, let's say, just December 2025, there's nothing at all that shows anything of being scared. Just to the contrary, he shows confidence based on economic and military strength of Russia. Economic strength is that Russia is independent of Western anything. This is something that has to be understood. It does not need anything from the West. Whatever it needs, it can take from China, and the rest it produces itself. So economic strength, monetary strength, doesn't need the dollar, doesn't need anything. It has its own currency reserves, a ruble-based trade, and gold. And of course, military strength, something the Western media doesn't want to talk about it, but it is a fact that Russia is one of, if not the most powerful military machine army in the world today, with hypersonic missiles that the United States does not have. So I don't believe he's scared. Now, theory number three. Putin's restraint is his method as usual. Now, that is a powerful argument, which actually, the argument is that if we look at historical record, Putin never acted immediately and always very cautiously. So this argument goes, just wait and see. It may be that he's just waiting. He's always been like that. And if we look at his reaction when in June 2025, the Israelis and then the Americans bombed Iran, a critically important ally of Russia, There was a verbal condemnation. That's it. There was nothing else. But there was at least a verbal condemnation. There was an offer to mediate. There was a telephone call to Netanyahu and to Trump. There were some attempts to show a reaction. Now there is none. There's, of course, another crisis going on in Iran, and there is no reaction of any kind. Now, according to that argument, if we look at Putin's reaction during the collapse of Assad regime in Syria, very similar. It was very restrained. Assad was welcome to come to Russia. There were no discussion at all whether this is a loss to Russia, whether this is a humiliation of Russia. Simply no reaction at all. Very similar. And of course, when General Soleimani was killed in 2020, there was also outcry everywhere in the world that this is banditry, that this is terrorism, and then from Putin, nothing. Just not even condolences to Soleimani's family. And finally, another example was the seizure of Russian consulate in San Francisco during the first term. No, I'm sorry, this was under Obama, and the same thing. There was no reaction. In fact, there was a like Christian kiss your enemy on the other cheek, which means that Trump invited the American diplomats to a Christmas reception in Russia rather than do any kind of a countermeasure responding to American provocative action. So this is theory number 3, as usual. Theory number 4 is weakness. And the major proponent of this theory is a quite well-known American journalist and commentator, and that's Paul Craig Roberts. Now, he always said in all of his columns for years now that Putin is weak, that Putin's restraint encourages his enemies. Paul Craig Roberts always wrote that it would be better for Russia to deliver a crushing blow to Ukraine and to win the war quickly and decisively. And his procrastination and his waiting and his limited response only encouraged further escalation by the West. And he demonstrated it in many of his articles that the West delivered the tanks and then the F-15 and then the ATACMS missiles, and Putin just took the blows and never responded in anything that could be considered decisive blow. So like a part of that theory also I could cite, but I put it in a separate category, and I call it Gilbert Doctorow theory. Gilbert Doctorow is also a very well-known specialist on Russia, and he's often on YouTube, and he is very attentive listener of what's going on in Russia. He does a lot of things that I do too, which is listen to Russian talk shows and the public opinion and various views explained by a variety of people. So he is a very attentive Russian-speaking specialist on Russian affairs. So his theory was fascinating. This was like in mid-December that Gilbert Doctorow said an extraordinary thing. He said that it can well be that by the end of the year, by the end of 2025, Putin may be removed from office. Now, at first, I was absolutely overwhelmed by this kind of prediction. On what basis? What could it be? But it seems that there's some kind of a logic to this explanation. He would be removed not by pro-Western fifth column, not by any of those liberals and businessmen who want to restart good relations with the West. No, The threat comes from the nationalists, from those who are tired of the procrastination that Paul Craig Roberts described so well, that they have enough. And what I could do next is identify the areas where these people disagree with President Putin. And that gives some validity that some disagreement may be going on. So I have, of course, no information about the workings on the Kremlin and what is going on behind closed doors. There's no way we can know for sure what is happening. But what I do know is the mentality of the patriots. I do know the mentality of the generals. I do know the mood in the army. And I do know what different segments of society say, especially those that say it openly in various talk shows and discussion groups that I watch regularly. So, there are four major areas of disagreement by the, let's say, patriots with President Putin. Number one, they disagree with Putin that only four provinces plus Crimea should be returned to Russia. There are many speeches in the Duma. There are articles in the Pravda, in the Communist Party. There are words of Dugin, a very famous and influential uh, philosopher. There are many, many sources that say that is not enough. Russia's war aims should officially be proclaimed, that at the very minimum it should be Odessa and Kharkov, and then a change of regime for the rest of Ukraine that would never represent any danger to Russia. They cannot accept a, uh, a rule of the current corrupt oligarchy in Ukraine because it is a threat to Russia's very survival. That's a serious disagreement because Putin's official position still is four provinces and the deal with Trump. Number two, the overthrow of Zelensky regime. Now, Putin's official position is make a deal. Now, he does not accept Zelensky, of course, but he does accept a deal in principle. And the motions are that there is negotiations and that Putin's the 28 plan, and then there's a 20-point plan, and then there's going back and forth, where these people say, we don't want any plan. We don't need anything at all with this regime backed by the Western powers. So the only acceptable outcome of this war is complete and total capitulation of Zelensky's regime and annexation of Russian-speaking Novorossiya, and the rest of Ukraine should have a government friendly to Russia. That's their position. That's number two in my list. Now, number three is the attitude to Trump himself. There are many voices in the Russian media that are very inimical to Trump. They don't like Trump. They feel that Trump is an imperialist. They feel that Trump is untrustworthy, that anything signed with Trump could be thrown away the next day. They basically argue that a person like Trump, who is encouraging seizure of Russian vessels and more sanctions against Russia and continuous economic pressure, is not the person to make a deal with. They are tired of Putin's games with Trump. They do not trust Trump and don't want to have anything to do with him or any other American president. This is number three, disagreement. And number four is captured Russian vessels. Now, the reaction I see in the Russian media is outrage. It is a question of Russian honor. It is a question of Russian force and respect and the international law. And of course, that partly explained why, even though Putin said nothing, there is some indication that Russia is beginning to use military escorts. The frigates were sent today to escort Russian vessels near Portugal. So, what is my take on this and the conclusion? I would say that a serious disagreement probably is going on. I will not go as far as Mr. Doctorow, that the situation is as bad for Putin that is a question of his possible overthrow. No, I wouldn't say that. But what I do know, and I can assert, that serious disagreements are going on in Russia. Some may demand much more powerful response in defense of Russian commitments, Russian treaty obligation, Russian honor, and Russian strategic interests. Now, in my book, From Lenin to Putin, I explained that Putin came to power and maintained power because he was so good at combining and walking between various interest groups in Russia. He listened to all of them and he managed to structure policy to please all of these constituencies: the businessmen, the communists, the army, the workers, the mothers, and all the others. He was really, really good at this. Now, it appears that now this capacity of Putin's that kept him in power is endangered because silence is not the answer. People want answer, people want leadership. Now, it could well be that tomorrow he will appear and give the answers, and that would become everything would become clear. But it could also be that there is no simple solution, and there is no simple gratification for all the groups, and that serious disagreement in Russia may yet reveal themselves in the public. Thank you very much. Please subscribe to my channel. Please say likes if you do. Write your comments, and I invite you to read my book, From Lenin to Putin. Bye-bye.